There's a phrase we say, only three people on a film set care anything about sound. The rest are there for picture. Those three people, boom operator, sound utility, and the sound mixer. Now, in all honesty, this is a little bit of an exaggeration. I mean, there are other people that do care. A lot of producers want to make sure the sound is clean. And, obviously the director does too, but more often than not, directors are concentrated on picture. They think making a movie. They don't think making a radio show. So when it comes down to directors, you have to kind of feel them out real quickly on the fly and get an idea of what you're dealing with. I've worked with directors in the past that don't mind overlaps, for example. They're big into ad libs, and so they don't mind if actors talk over each other, and they're actually almost encouraging of that. Now, technically, in a perfect world, if we see multiple actors on the screen at the same time, fine, they can overlap. But as soon as you only have your eyes on one actor and the other actor is off camera, you need them to not overlap. And by that I mean when they talk over each other. The reason why is because in post, you can easily slide their dialogue on top of each other so that way it makes an overlapping effect. But you can't do that if they're married together because they talk over each other and you record them that way. And yes, there are things you could do to minimize the drastic effects of that. Like you can second boom the off camera dialogue, that kind of thing does help a bit. But in all honesty, just get it clean if you can. Now, the reason I'm pointing out that that is sometimes a problem is because directors all have different styles. And a lot of the time when I am on a TV show, for example, I don't know my next director unless they happen to come to set and introduce themselves. And I've been on shows before where directors have come by and introduced themselves to the camera department, the ADs, props, everyone except sound. Well, that pretty much tells me where their mind is regarding sound very, very quickly. But I've also been on shows before, like, for example, my favorite director, who I will not name, but she came to set the very first day, introduced herself to everybody and hung out with everybody just a little bit to learn about us, try to get our names right, wanted to make sure that she understood where we were coming from, and to kind of make sure that she conveyed to us that she acknowledged that it was a team effort and that every single one of us was doing something valuable for the show. She actually not only cares about the overall product that she was making, but she cares about the crew members and our particular crafts and arts. And that's really refreshing when you have a director like that. Now, here's another here's another thing that you really got to keep in mind with regards to directors. They have their mind on the big picture, and that could mean, if example, they're novice, because and you gotta keep in mind that you may be there for a TV show, and you might be doing 13 episodes as a boom operator, and this is just one of 2 shows you're gonna be doing the entire year that is maybe the other one's a feature, for example, and you've got a career that's, let's say, 10 years long, so you have quite a few TV series under your belts spanning hundreds of episodes, maybe a couple 100 episodes, and you maybe have 10 or so features under your belt, maybe even more. Plus, you've day played a lot. As for directors, if they come in for one episode of television, they are there for one episode, and then they go off to do another TV show. That's one episode. They go off to do another TV show. That's one episode. They're not going to work constantly, one episode after another, after another, after another. And so they could have 10 years of experience, but only have 30 episodes under their belts. It could be argued that if you were a boom operator and you only did 30 episodes, you would be pretty green. I mean, you can do 30 episodes of television in a year and a half. That doesn't make you a veteran. And a director is carried a lot by their AD staff and the DP to a certain degree, but you got to also keep in mind directors come from a different mentality, and that is one of having the whole big picture. Now, I've said the big picture a couple of times. The reason why is because if you're, for example, shooting a scene that takes place at sunset, the director wants to make sure they get that at golden hour before the sun goes down, because if they don't get it, they have to go out there another day and get it. Or they have to just say, I can't do that shot after all, and we gotta sacrifice that. For audio, they can play catch up on that later if they need to. We can record our audio in the darkness. Now, yes, I know that sound during the day and sound at night is totally different. We have totally different creatures out there. There's even a feeling in the air. You can hear it in the air. Even if there's everything else is even and you're up in the Arctic, if it's dark versus if it's light, it sounds different. You and I know that. Directors don't. And so directors are not going to think about that. What they're going to be thinking about is the sun is setting. I got to get this shot really quickly. And I've been on shows before where directors have been completely checked out with sound when it gets closer to the end of the day because they just have to worry about making their day for camera. Sound is, after all, a lot less expensive to produce than picture is. They can, if they really need to, go back and recreate the entire thing via ADR. And with the actors going in there and saying their lines in a studio. Obviously, we don't want that, but it can happen if they need it to happen that way. Now, directors, the reason I say they're weird creatures is because directors are very focused on the visual, even though half of the experience of watching a movie or a television show is sound. Half of it's picture, half of it's sound. It's the visual, it's the auditory. But they're concentrated very much on the visual. Now, what's interesting about this to me is that in the world of motion picture sound and television sound, sound is just expected to work. A director sets up a shot, they're talking to the DP, oh yeah, that camera angle is going to be great, completely oblivious to the whole sound department because they just naturally assume we're going to work when they take their headphones and put them on and look at the screen. It just magically works. Sound is right here, and the actors are on screen, and it just looks and sounds like a TV show to them, although on a slight delay because picture is delayed at Video Village, ever so slightly, maybe a frame or two. Off topic yet again. Okay, so a director who's watching the screen and trying to make their TV show is just going to naturally assume sound is there. Now, that can make it kind of interesting for a boom operator because a boom operator's responsibility is to make sure that whatever is on camera is captured by the sound department. It all starts with that one microphone that the boom operator carries. And if you can't get that, then get a plant out there, get a lav, in the works or something like that. Make sure you have that audio covered. Now, sometimes the whole overall process kind of leads a director astray. They forget about certain things. I'm on a show right now, at the time of this video, that is a show that takes place in a strip club in Mississippi. And a lot of the lighting is hard lights. We have a lot of smoke, meaning that if my boom happens to swing through the air, those hard lights happen to cast a shadow on my boom through the air because of the smoke, and I will cast a shadow through the smoke sometimes, and I can't see that. It's something I can plan on. So I have to expect that and anticipate that sometimes. At the same time, we have wardrobe that's very challenging because how are you going to put a lav mic on someone that's not wearing any clothes? And then we, of course, have multiple cameras, and it's a very challenging show. The reason I'm mentioning this is because there are some directors I've worked with that say, just do your best. When I say you're shooting a wide shot with like 5 feet of headroom and you're doing a tight shot at the same time, which is like here up. If you're doing that, I cannot possibly match with the wide shot, this shot right here, a close-up shot. And that's what it's about, is matching. Because if I play a microphone, even a long reach microphone like an MKH70, there's only so much we can do if we cannot get a lav on them and they're standing up in the middle of the room, so I can't put a plate on. I can't put a plant on them either. And if it's a lock-off shot, I can't do the invisible boom trick either. If it's not a lock-off shot. If the shot's moving or it's a steady cam, something like that. I mean, unless post does allow VFX to smudge out a boom or something like that. Most of the time, at the time of this video, they are not going to go full throttle with that unless you're against a green screen or something. So a director may have their mind in a completely different place and say, yeah, let's go ahead and get all these shots at the same time because we can. Not thinking about the fact that it is impossible for sound to match a wide with 5 feet of headroom to a tight when there's no place for a microphone to get anywhere close to them. And in that circumstance, a boom operator may have to approach the director and say, and kind of convey the issue. Now, some directors are approachable, some directors are not. I've worked with directors before that as soon as I have approached them, they'll be like, yeah, just do your best. Do your best. Whatever you could get. And I've had other directors that say, yeah, yeah, yeah. Just I'm not concerned with sound. Just whatever you can get is great. We'll ADR the rest. I'm like, wow, okay. Those are obviously directors that don't care about sound and just magically assume that it's going to either work out or they'll replace it in post because they don't even care. A lot of those directors won't even be listening to their headphones during a take. They're just going to be watching it. Those are directors that, in all honesty, annoy me. But then there's also the polar opposites. My favorite director, for example, is one that almost always wears the headphones. And if she hears something that doesn't sound exactly the way she wants it to, she would come to me and say, Alan, did we get that? Or she would say, was the airplane a problem? Or they'll be listening on the fly, and if a truck drives by, they'll say, hold on a second, go back, start this line over again. And they'll start them over again because they're constantly listening. Directors like that want to not only capture the audio of the show, they want to capture the performance. Because in all honesty, as Ken Strain, who's a veteran boom operator who's very respected in the community of boom ops, as Ken Strain once told me, the lavs catch the dialogue, but the boom captures the performance. Think about that. That's really powerful right there. The lavs capture the dialogue, but the boom captures the performance. Sure, you can get the lines on the boom, I mean on the lavs, and it's going to sound okay. I mean, post can do magical things with it. It's never going to fatten up quite like a boom will. And if an actor is turning their head, they go off mic, if they tilt their head down or up, all those little bitty things that they do is going to change. Not to mention if they do any kind of movement like this and they make all kinds of noise on camera, that's gonna make this whole, track go to garbage. But a boom can capture all that performance. An actor's clothes are no longer an issue. It's just another little sound underneath their voice when they move around. If they turn their head, you track with their head. I mean, a lav mic that's right here in this little gap right here, as soon as I turn my head off axis, I mean, you could even hear it on the microphone I'm speaking into here. As soon as I talk off axis like this, it's going to sound more distant. It's going to sound off mic. But a boom that's tracking from here over to here is going to stay with them. Now, that's really, really important, and it's very, very powerful. And part of a boom operator's job is to convey that power to the director, but not in an oppressive way. You don't get this, your audio is going to suck. That's not the right way to do it. You have to be more tactful than that. Some directors who are not very approachable from the sound department perspective, you may need to play a good cop, bad cop with your sound mixer because obviously you want to maintain rapport on set. The boom operator goes out there and tries talking to the director, and the director completely shuts down the boom operator. You try to approach again, or maybe you try to approach through a first AD or something like that. Don't care anything about it. Then the conversation may be one that the sound mixer will have to have. But then, depending on the show you're working on, they may not care anything about sound. It may, as far as they're concerned, they're shooting The Artist, which was a movie that there was no dialogue in really. So if your director is just not focused on sound, there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes they're just about making their day. Or like, for example, when I've worked on Marvel movies, those movies are all about action. And yes, there are scenes that take place that are dialogue driven, but if there is any kind of dialogue that takes place and they need an actor's hair to be blowing in the wind or something like that, believe me, they're going to have E-fans blasting the actor. And you better put wind protection on your lavs because that's going to be expected. And if the camera has to go, on a cable or on a super techno crane, and you try to say, hey, I'm picking that up. I hear that sound. They're going to say, okay, all right, that's fine. Do what you got to do. Because when they're spending that kind of money on a Marvel movie, they're not going to think about sound anyway, because they're going to pretty much replace all the dialogue, not replace, but they're going to ADR the entire movie, whether they use it or not. I mean, most of the time on the big, huge budget shows, they'll go ahead and record with the actors all the dialogue. They'll go ahead and record it wild. And then what post will do when they piece it together and they look at it is they'll say, well, is the production dialogue better or is the ADR better? And if the production dialogue's better, they'll absolutely use that. But if the ADR is better, then they may say, okay, well, let's go ahead and build it with Foley and let's sound design it and do what we need to do. Quite often, though, even if they ADR it, they're going to still use the production dialogue, which is nice. I mean, because it's the performance the actor had when they did that particular scene, and that's really, much better. But directors on those big, huge blockbuster movies, the Fast and the Furious movies and stuff, they are concentrated very much on stunts. They are concentrating very much on the big, huge the visuals that are going to sell the movie. Because as far as they're concerned, as a general rule, they may say, I want good sound, but they're wanting to make sure that that picture works right. As a matter of fact, even on other shows, you may do 8 takes of something because the director's looking for one little bitty key part of the performance. And as soon as they get that on camera, if the sound department got it 7 times and then that 8th time the boom operator hit the ceiling with the mic or missed a cue or something like that. If you say, I'm sorry, sound needs another one, good luck with that one. Chances are you're not going to get it unless your director is extremely sound friendly. Now, directors have their own goals that they have to accomplish on set, and the ones that are sound friendly are very willing to work with you. If you say, like, for example, I'm on the show that takes place in a club, and one of the things that we'll run into is actors that will just be talking in a normal voice, and when they're talking like this in a nightclub, that doesn't really work, does it? Because obviously, as soon as they put in, speakers behind them, then it's gotta be louder. You can't have someone talking like this to someone 3 feet away and expect to hear someone in a club at that volume, so you gotta think ahead, and you have to say, um and you have to let the director know that the scene you're doing is a loud scene. It takes place in a very loud environment. So you can't just say, they need to be louder because this is a nightclub. That's not going to be good for the director. But one of the things that I'll do is I'll go to them and say, considering that we're in a nightclub, does the actor's volume work for you? That way, it's not me telling them this is wrong. That's me asking a question that drives the point home that we're in a loud club and the actors are not speaking very loudly. And obviously, if the director has been paying attention, they'll say, good point. They need to speak up louder. And they'll go ahead and get that impression. Because, in all honesty, one of the customer service tricks I learned years ago is don't tell people what you want them to do or how you want them to react to something. Excuse me. Ask them a question that helps lead them to the solution. Because if it's their idea, it's going to be much stronger and more effective in their minds than it would be if someone else tells them what to do. Sure, I could go up there and say, they need to speak up. This is a nightclub. It's loud. We'll never hear them. But by me saying something along those lines, it makes the director think about the actual problem that we are facing. And then they obviously get to brilliantly come up with a solution. And that also puts them in control of their own episode again. Now, I've worked with first ADs also because they're directors as well. Now, first ADs are the ones that are keeping the schedule going for the day. They basically direct the crew, and they're the timekeepers. So, and technically part of set safety, even though that's really everybody's responsibility now. It's one of those things where the first AD is also someone on many shows, if you cannot approach the director because the director is, let's say, Michael Bay is not going to have anything to do with sound. He's concentrating on blowing something up on set. And so if that's the case, he's concentrating about the visual. Sound just better work. And if that's the case, you may not be able to directly approach someone. And this is just an example. I've never worked with Michael Bay, even though I know the guys that do. But I've worked with directors like this, where you approach them about something, and talk to my first. Okay, you go and mention the first AD, and those, yeah, he doesn't care about that. He'd just do your best. Or, yeah, he's not going to care anything about, he doesn't care about sound. Just figure it out. Do your best. Make it work. That kind of attitude. And those directors are those that, in my opinion, could be more effective if they just cared a little bit about the process. Because in many circumstances, a minor thing is all it takes to take something from non-sound friendly to sound friendly. Like the example I gave earlier about the 5 feet of headroom on one shot and the tight. A sound friendly director may say, okay, I tell you what, I like the move so you can't do the invisible boom technique, but what you could do, let me get like 3 takes, or we're gonna do like 5 takes because you know the director's style. They're gonna do like 5 or 6 takes. Let me say, I tell you what, let me get like 1 or 2 of the wide, then I'll shut it down and we'll just roll the tight for like the other 3 or 4. Those directors, it's fine. It's perfectly fine to do to go in for coverage at that point and to throw the boom out over there. Now, don't just take liberties and say, okay, they said 2, so after 2, I'm gonna go ahead and do it because they'll scream boom or somebody will scream boom unless it's planned right before the take. And if it's a reset back to 1, reset back to 1, they're obviously gonna come to set to direct the actors, intercept them and say, hey, real quick here, is this my take? Or is this where I can jump in? That kind of thing. Because obviously it's just go, 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 shut down the wide, and that way you can get the tight, that kind of thing. You have to know how to work with your directors. Think customer service. Think about the director and their goals. What makes that director tick? Because it's all about playing to the person. It's about working with people. The director can be a big asset for sound, or they could be someone that just is more of a challenge than anything. And I've worked with all kinds of directors. Some directors are very sound friendly. They hear everything. They'll call us out on things, you know. Is there a lot of footsteps in there? Can y'all like foot foam them or something like that? I'm like, well, you know, we were actually foot foaming them, but then the second AD decided to add 3 more background crosses last minute, and we didn't have a chance to do it before the first AD wanted to roll. So yeah, we can absolutely do that. And then because the director has called for it, the ADs will give you time to fix it. And that's really nice too. Now, the reason I'm mentioning all this about working with directors can be a challenge, yet it's also very rewarding when you get a good a good director that's sound friendly, is because the director is in many cases with regards to features the person that if they really like a particular sound mixer, they will want to work with that sound mixer again. When I've been on teams before where a director has said, "I want that sound mixer because I really like their team." And if that's the case, then and some old school directors have their sound mixer who does all their movies. And they'll just say, "This is who I'm going to be using. This is who I'm going to be using." And you could go down director's IMDb and go with a production sound mixer's IMDb, and there's hand in hand because they work well together. And they have a mutual understanding of goals without being obtrusive, without being without just saying, okay, fine, I can't do that, and or you have to do it this way, or it's just not going to work. And if you can make a director happy like that, then you're going to potentially, if you're a sound mixer, have a long career with that director, and that's great. Now, some directors I've worked with that don't know me, that haven't worked with me, they always want to, and a director who steps onto a new set, they have to build rapport with people. And a lot of the times, if you're a very confident boom operator, they're going to see that real quickly. Even if everything you say is coming straight from your sound mixer, they're going to see how you command the set for the sound department, how you handle circumstances and situations. If you always make it work and it always sounds good, they're going to assume that you're doing a good job. If you don't know how to ask them something, if you approach them too timidly, you spend too much time explaining a very simple thing without really asking, and they're like, "What are you asking me here? What are you saying?" Because you know, director has to shoot. They don't have all the time in the world to listen to a whole story only for you to ask a question. You have to be very, very precise and very quick and easy with the things you say and the requests you give ADs. And directors are no different. Directors are the people that have the overall picture in mind for that entire show, and they have to get it within a 12-hour day or whatever the scheduled day is. If it's longer than that, they're really not going to want to play around with shutting down a wide shot and saying, actually, yeah, let's not do the wide, the medium, and the tight at the same time. Let's just do the wide. They may not want to do that if they're if it's scheduled as a 15-hour day. They may just say, "I don't have time for that. I'm sorry. We're just gonna have to go." And I've worked on shows before where we've shot outside on the side of the street, even though we've had ITC, which is intermittent traffic control, where we have police officers shutting down the traffic on the street. The director may say, I don't have time. Let's just get this done. So roll sound, let's roll and let's go. And then they roll and then they say, now shut down traffic, and traffic's still flowing on the street until the last like 30 seconds before the director says cut. And those are frustrating. Those are very frustrating circumstances too, because then you just are completely at the mercy of whatever you can get. Because if things get going too fast on set and it starts to progress too late in the day, the first thing that starts happening is when people get tired and people have a certain amount of work to do, people start to get sloppy and people start to cut corners. Directors are no different. Directors are just going to say, okay, one take, that was brilliant, let's move on. When at the beginning of the day, on the wide shots, the establishing shots even, they could be doing 10 takes. By the end of the day, they're saying, oh, that was brilliant, I loved it, let's move on, let's go into a tighter size. Oh, it was brilliant, I loved it, let's turn around. And you're like, single takes, really? That's not your style. It can be. So part of what you have to do is you have to read the director as well. If they are just going completely nuts because they're not getting the performance they want, it's starting to get too late, you have 3 more pages in another scene that you have to do, and the sunset is setting in 2 hours, and that's a day exterior scene, then you might want to talk with your sound mixer, because the director, if they've been pretty sound friendly in the past, may not be sound friendly going into that second scene that's 3 pages and 4 people, and you only have 2 hours of light left. You have to really feel it out. Use the customer skills you have, customer service skills. You have to really interact well while thinking about the overall project, because keep in mind that this is a whole industry about making a product together. You can't just say, I'm a team player, I'm here for the project, just like you guys are. Oh, by the way, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need an Apple box. Can I get the ladder, please? Can you please turn that ballast into silent mode? Can the keys be stuck together? Can that wind chime be taken down? Can you move this sofa over here, please? The wardrobe department, can you help us by maybe putting a hole in that pocket so we can put a transmitter in there? All those other departments are working with you. You got to work with them too. You can't just say, gimme, 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 gimme all of this because sound is so important. Who cares about picture? They're helping you. You have to understand that when the director is in a bind, they may not be as sound friendly, and the sound mixer, depending on who they are, may get testy about that. They may get feisty and say, you tell the director this. You may not be able to tell the director anything at that point. And I have told my directors, I have gone and talked to the first AD before, even though the sound mixer said, no, I told you to go to the director. I'm like, I can't approach the director right now. He or she is crazy because he has like 4 hours of work to do and an hour and a half to do it before the sun sets. And that's when I will also usually approach the sound mixer and say, oh, we're starting to get behind now. We have this whole nother scene and the director is going to start really going crazy now, because from experience, I can tell when that's going to start to happen. And I'll at least have that conversation with the sound mixer. And I may end up, depending on the sound mixer's mood and how they're doing, I may end up saying, so if there's anything in particular you can think of, I want to try to nip this in the bud really early. Try to tell me what I need to, if you hear anything, tell me something that I may need to address early. Because I know that once we get into crazy mode, the director is not going to be one to work with this. One mixer I work with and work quite well with knows too that no matter what happens, he will not ask for anything as soon as it hits golden hour. As soon as golden hour hits, if a lav starts to get a little bit scratchy, he'll say, okay, we're just going to let it go unless we're doing a full, reset or something like that. And I can have the utility right there at the very, very edge of set where they say, cut, the sound utility goes in there, tweaks it, and then runs out. That's fine. But if they say reset back to 1, director won't, the sound mixer won't sweat it, because they understand that if they say back to 1 real quick and action, back to 1 real quick and action, and there's no time to tweak that, this sound mixer understands that it could present a challenge, and the audio may not be great, but at the same time, if you hold up that director and you keep them from getting what they need, picture wise, because you have to do a tweak to the lav, they may not take care very kindly to that. Now, obviously, you want to be very sensitive to that. I will say, okay, I want you standing right next to me, and the second they say, reset or whatever, see if you could jump in there and just do a little tweak, or they'll be standing right on the set with whatever they need to fix that rig. If it's replace a bunion cushion or a piece of moleskin or something like that, they'll have it in their hand, so that way they just go over there, they grab it, they do this and put it back on there, whatever the case may be. But my point here is, depending on your sound mixer, depending on your director, there's going to be a certain workflow change that may happen as the sun starts to set. Now, that's a little bit off topic here, but that at least, actually, it's not really off topic, is it? It's completely on topic. But the place I'm really going with this is directors change throughout the day when they're in just one of the phrases we also say is, we start off the day like Gone with the Wind and we end the day like Dukes of Hazzard. Because at the beginning of the day, it's very, very slow and let's make this change. Yeah, give the costume department a couple of minutes and that's fine. And then by the end of the day, it's like, just get out of there. If is the costume on? Is it fine? Is the collar down? Great. Let's just get out of the way. Let's go. And it's crazy mode. Now, those are both Atlanta type shows. I mean, Gone with the Wind is Atlanta, Dukes of Hazzard, Atlanta too. Another phrase that they'll say is, start off the day like Lord of the Rings and end the day like the Blair Witch Project. That's another example. And that's not specific to Georgia. But my point on that is, you start off the day very slow. And then as you start to progress through the day, you start to you build up momentum and things start to get crazy. And you got to finish your day. So it's going to start getting a little bit hyper, a little bit crazier. And directors are going to be feeling that too. So as a boom operator, you have to react to that, anticipate this based on the previous other days that you've worked with the director, and see where they're going with this. If it's a director that once they say action, they say reset, go again, reset, go again. All right, now zoom in 20 mils, action. Zoom in another 20 mils, action. And they don't ever cut until it's time to turn around. And then they're screaming, go ahead and roll. And the DP is like, no, I got to like this. And no, don't worry about it. Let's just roll. I've been with those directors too. They make things quite challenging if on a wide shot, for example, you're on top of a ladder and they say, zoom in 20 mils and action. Like, no, hold on a second, because now I have to climb off this ladder and it's not going to be safe if I jump down too quickly and have to get into a new position. And I have, even with the director I'm speaking about, butted heads with him. And the reason why is because safety is not something that I can really turn my back on. I had worked out with the first AD. I said, okay, so when we are punching in, and we had this big Steadicam shot through this whole house, and there was a point where the Steadicam operator goes quickly back through the kitchen, slings around a 180, and follows the actor who's kind of hastily walking through to go talk to his wife. Well, in that circumstance, I knew that I could, because I've already talked to the camera operator about it. When we punch in, he's not going to see the floor, so I knew I could put in carpets. But because of the way that the camera looked on the wide, I couldn't put carpets in there. And I'd worked out this whole move so that way I knew where to be on the 180 swing and all that kind of stuff. It was fine. It was going to work out great. But the problem with it was the director said, okay, zoom in more. Okay, that's it. Let's go again. And I said, all right, real quick, I'm going to throw in this carpet and this carpet. And he says, okay, great. It's in. Let's go. No, I got to tape it in. No. It's no, to go. No, we're not going to go until I make this safe. Because at that point, I was like, I'm going to make this safe, because if the Steadicam operator is running backwards, hits the edge of that carpet and slips and falls, that's not going to be something they blame me on. If an actor who's running in a scene happens to slip on that carpet, I would be responsible for that. And I'm not going to allow that to happen. The safe is going to be safe if I throw down a carpet. And I want to make sure of that. So even a director that can be kind of out of control in that circumstance, you sometimes do need to take a stand, because you can say something like, that carpet is a liability. I need to tape it down for safety. If you say something like that, and they still don't listen and they refuse to let it happen, you have shifted liability onto them, because you have said it, and because you're still rolling, you got that on tape. You've said it's a liability. That means that it is going to not be covered, most likely by insurance, if you make them aware that it's a liability. If you then say it's not safe, it is a liability. You have told them it's not safe and they need to deal with it. And it's a liability, which means it's not going to be covered by insurance. That's directly on the show. That's not you. I'm not saying that to pass the blame. I'm saying that because it is something that needs to be addressed in the case of safety and the security of the people that I work with. It will be something that I will address, and I will butt heads with the director if I need to. Um, and if I'm fired because I want to see because of a safety concern, so be it. Believe me, I'll have my business agent down there saying, "You fired someone for maintaining safety on a set?" That wouldn't go over very well. So, I've taken a couple of tangents, but I think they've actually, kind of been on the topic here, because they're all based in reality, things you have to contemplate and think about with regards to working with directors. Most of the time, directors are the middle ground. They're willing to maybe do one or two favors for sound, but that's really only if it's not going to put them out. If they if you say, I got a wide here and I got a tight here, they may say, talk to the DP. DP may say, we really got to make this stay, in which case you may have to, talk to your sound mixer and see if it's something that you really, you need to play a different tactic on. Or they may say the wire sounds fine. Let's just do that. Could be a wire show. Depends. I mean, it's one of those things where working with directors can be a challenge because they're constantly thinking about the overall picture of the show, and most likely they're concentrating on the picture aspect. The better directors I've worked with are ones that understand the entire process. They understand that sound is a key part of it as well. And because of that, they are very focused on wanting to deliver a good product, especially when they get into post. They don't want to hear something's off mic. They don't want to hear that something sounds, when they look at the dailies and they're looking at a shot like this, they don't want it to sound too far away. They want it to sound good, just like your showrunners do and your producers and your UPM, everybody above the line. Those people are wanting it to sound good too. They don't want you to be set up for failure. They want it to sound good, and so that everyone is getting having a successful show, because it makes everybody's work in picture look better when it sounds better. So I guess to make to come full circle here, with regards to working with directors, you have to read the director, find out how receptive they are to sound, and that can be an ever-changing thing throughout the day. This day versus this day, this week versus this week. If you're dealing with stunts, if you're dealing with effects, and there's a whole lot of other things going on, they may not be, but I mean, obviously, still, it's worth mentioning, they may not be as focused on sound on those particular days. And depending on the show you're working on, TV, it's usually easier for you to approach a director directly. When I was working on Avengers Infinity War, I can't just go straight to the directors and say, guys, the fans are just too much. They're blowing the actress's hair too much, and I'm not getting good. They're not going to listen to me. They're concentrating on the super techno crane that's coming up and over everything and landing on her, where it's there's a ship over her in the movie, and so they got to blow their hair all over the place. It's going to sound like a fan. So I'm kind of powerless to fight that one, and I'm dumb for even asking on a show of that budget and magnitude, because usually the bigger budget shows, you have to have a more impressive resume to get on those. Um, and so they kind of expect you to understand the game when you get on a big show like that. But anyway, on the smaller shows, especially if you're working in indies a whole lot, if your director is too focused on picture, because maybe let's say they work in TV and something, and they're now doing their own production, they're doing their own show, they may feel the need to concentrate on picture because that's what the big boys do. But on an indie, that you can't really get away with that, because the expectations, as you heard me say in the past, the expectation of the sound department are the same on every level of production. So it doesn't matter if you're working on a $1 billion budget movie like the Avengers, double the Infinity War Endgame, or if you are working on an indie and nobody's getting paid and it's just a labor of love for the director. I've worked on both ends. And The expectations are the same. It's got to be clear dialogue that's on mic with a low noise floor. It's got to sound good, no overlaps. Those things are critical. Those are key. Every single show has got to be the same way. It's not like where a camera is, you have the wrong filter and you have the wrong setting and they say, oh, geez, it's going to look like terrible. Let's process it. Yeah, geez, even if you process it, doesn't look right. Tell you what, add a filter and this whole scene's going to be moody. Ooh, the audience is going to think that's really, really cool. But you can't exactly say, I couldn't get a boom over there and the lava's scratchy. Oh, that's artistic. Doesn't work that way. And a lot of the times on these indies, directors are not thinking about sound. They're thinking about the picture. And it's your job as a sound person to let them know that if they don't get these tracks, if they don't get it, and they don't prioritize sound on these little projects, it can shelve your project. A few months ago, I was approached about a show with a young lady I'm actually working with right now. She was producing a short movie that involves, special effects and actors, getting into fights and stunts and this kind of thing. It's a short movie, but she quite literally hired the second worst audio person I've ever met in my life. This person had absolutely no idea what they were doing, did not take precautions, for whatever reason, did not bring in a boom operator or anyone else. He decided he could handle it all on his own and recorded it like garbage. It sounds to me like they used the camera mic, and so I asked her, I said, "Did y'all use the camera mic for this?" And they said, "Yeah, because believe it or not, a lot of the times the audio that the sound mixer got didn't sound very good." I'm like, "So you used the little microphone built onto your DSLR camera for your audio for this guide track?" And she's like, "Yeah, sorry, sad about that. Sorry to say, but yeah, we're sad about that, but that's the case." I'm like, and unfortunately, in that particular circumstance, she was working on the visuals and getting it done. And I said, I hate to tell you this. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you need an entire audio track manufactured from the ground up. You got to do the sound design. You got to basically create the audio. You got to create Foley. You got to create your score. You got to create everything, because none of this that your audio person recorded is any good. That's why you're using the camera mic on the DSLR camera when they happen to actually hit record audio. It was not a pretty thing, and I put her in contact because it happened over the Christmas holidays, and I knew quite a few very talented sound people that were not doing anything and would gladly help out somebody like that just to give them something to do during the day, but until the shows started picking up again. But even then, they weren't able to help her because she was too deep in it at that time. And I said, "Why in the world did you hire him?" And he said, "He was cheap." So unfortunately, she has sabotaged her entire show because she didn't think about sound or prioritize it. Neither did the director, neither did the other producers. And just because they come from a mentality of sound always ends up working, it does when you're working with a professional team. It doesn't in an indie. So if you're working a lot in indies, make sure your director knows the expectations that you have of something. And if something doesn't work, and and your indie director is not understanding something or completely oblivious to it, you need to explain it to that director, because what's the worst thing they're going to do is fire you and you lose $100 a day or $50 a day if you're even making that. I mean, sometimes I've worked on these little freebie shows where I've got more experience than probably any 10 crew members their times combined. And I've had to show, no, here's how you undersling a flag. Here's how you actually set this, this is how you set a C stand. No, you're doing this wrong. This is how you work a bounce. This is how I've had to do that kind of stuff before. The reason I'm mentioning that is because in those kind of circumstances where everyone's learning, you have to make sure the director learns it as well. Because if you don't, that director is going to suddenly work their way up to another level of show. And as soon as that happens, they are thinking the unrealistic expectations. They're going to think that things are magically just going to work out. They have to understand that there's a time and a place to just concentrate on picture, and there's a time and a place that you got to prioritize sound. And working with directors is one of those things where a boom operator has to have a dedicated skill set for interacting with that director. If a director is very green, you have to gently coax them in the right direction. And in that circumstance, a first AD may have a pretty tight leash on them and say, talk to me. Obviously, can't fight a first AD on that. But you still want to try to educate the director as you can. Ask for things then through the first AD when you really definitely need them and say, no, I'm sorry, we really need this. And if it doesn't work out, got to go to the director. Say, I got to approach them about that. I'm sorry. So hopefully I've made my point here regarding working with directors. I have spoken now for quite a while, about 45 minutes by the time this video is done. And I'm sorry about that, been long-winded here, but directors are, being that they're the person in charge of the entire episode or entire feature, the skill set you have to work with them on can be a lot to manage. And it takes experience, it takes patience, it takes somehow suggestions of past successes to make sure that you are able to get what you need for your tracks and to make your sound mixer happy.
Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.